don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford. I'm the founder of the London Heads of People community. I'm not going to say a huge amount about what we do. I'll probably put some text up there in a little bit. Just very quickly, we do tech recruitment, but loads of our work is based in the communities. So we run 13 or so user groups. We do mentor introductions and loads of other things like that. So I'll put some text there. Feel free to check it out if you're interested. But yeah, today we are being joined by Olya and Karthika. So Olya, Karthika, Karthika, should we start with you? Would you mind just saying a few words about like your background, the steps that have led you to your position now, sort of why you're in the industry, and yeah, where you come from.
Sure. So by trade, I'm an organizational psychologist. So what that means is I work with organizations for work effectiveness and strategically building their work effectiveness. So when you hear the words like org design and those kind of things, that's what I predominantly do. I've really only worked with tech companies or really hyper growth tech companies such as your Babylons. And so it's been really interesting journey. Series A to C is my bread and butter. I would say sort of 30 plus people. I know the tech industry very well. Outside of that, probably not as well as I should, but I'll be honest. Yeah, that's where my at, and then yeah, I developed from that, and yeah, that's what I am.
Fantastic. Thanks, Karthika. Olya, did you want to say just a few words on your background as well?
Just a few words on my background, I guess. I studied counseling psychology, and then I went and took sort of another course in transformational coaching as sort of a top up to a more day-to-day experience of being able to talk to people and manage relationships. That really helped me in my career. I started straight out of uni. I went into operations, and sort of I remained there for a while, really trying to get out of it, to be honest, and go into the people function, just because I always wanted to work with people, hence sort of the degree that I chose. But it gave me really a big kick and a push to go into that industry, because while I was working in the operations team, I just saw how much, energy and stress and personal involvement people would give to the employer, and just they weren't getting enough back, or they were unhappy, or there were some things that employer just did not ask, or did not want to investigate. And that really pushed me to go into the people team and be like, you know what, I have this different perspective to bring, and I really want to start actually making these decisions, or seeing where our company is going to go and how it's going to go there, with those people at heart, because they are the ones who are working for you, for the employer. So like, you have to give something back, and that's sort of what pushed me into the industry, really.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Olya. And Evie Evangeline Richards is the fourth one on the hosting panel here. So Evie and I worked together. I think we stopped working together 3 years ago. Did we, Evie? Something like that?
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
But yeah, Evie worked for RecWorks for a little bit as a recruiter, and has gone off and done a variety of other things in the meantime, but we've always kept in touch. She is now an aspiring HRist or peopleist or what have you. And so, yeah, so this series of events came about because Evie and I got chatting, and we were like, it'd be great. Let's get you in front of some HR kingpins and see what happens. So Evie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Barry. Yes, just to echo really what Barry said. So I feel very lucky to be here, and this isn't the first time that I have benefited from Barry and RecWorks' real focus on community and people. And primarily the reason why I would like to move into HR is, so I've got experience with recruitment. really on a personal level, really love communications and the importance of communication. And also we were just having a chat before the call started off, but the term emotional intelligence was used, which has always been something I've been very interested in. So yeah, so very lucky to be here to learn and observe something that with the juggernaut of HR, I really have little detailed idea about. So I wanted to start by asking, how much do you think HR is split between the legalities and the processes, and how much do you think is more, as you both just referenced to, is becoming more important now, the people and the employee experience and really the emotional intelligence? How much is the balance?
I'll let Olya go first.
I was hoping you were going to take that. So I think when we talk about legalities, it's like, or at least one thing that I noticed is that in some people teams, you do not actually have an employment law expert sitting there. And that's very, very common. Usually companies would have like an employment law firm that is consulting them from time to time, and Switchy certainly has that. When I kind of went officially into the people function, the first thing I did, I took the employment law course to get myself qualified, to get myself a diploma and understand what's happening. And actually, you know, when you think about the employment law and how the employer is supposed to treat people, process their documents, what sort of things they have to give back, what sort of things they're allowed to take, suddenly it's like there is no way you do not take it into account when you do people operations, or even when you work on culture. Because, you know, just take the very simple example of, let's say, employee engagement. So the concept where you as an employer are trying to, you know, create that great atmosphere and the sense of togetherness for all the people in your team to really go and, you know, feel like they are part of your organization and feel engaged with your mission and feel inspired by what you do, and willing to sort of give you all their full selves. And if you take that concept and you try to put an initiative together, in the back of your mind, you have to keep how any sort of benefits or any sort of perks that you're providing are going to affect your full-time permanent employees, how they're going to affect your contractors and freelancers that are working for you, how are you going to achieve that inclusivity for everyone while still follow that sort of employment law where you're not actually, like, there are some things you cannot provide to the contractor because that is considered a benefit, and in their contracts that is supposed to be excluded. So like it's a constant check-in. Like everything that I want to do, I have somewhere at the back of my mind some of the rules and regulations that I always keep at the back of my mind. So I would say it is that not one day goes by. Literally yesterday I had to think about it. The day before, like not one day go by that you don't think about the employment law and the legalities. And I think what is interesting for the culture and for going that one step further as a people team is, rather than focus on only that operational aspect in those legalities, when you try and take a step out of this and think outside the box and give something else to the team. So, you know, there is like a borderline, this is what I'm doing for you because I have to by law. And then I go like 5-6 steps further and I'm doing this for you because I care, because I want to invest my time, because I want to have this as a great place to work, because I want you to recognize it as the best place you ever worked at and always reminisce in your memories of how lovely that was for you to be here. So that is like, it's sort of like a layer, it's like a layered cake. That's my analogy.
And it sounds like that's going to be the factor that defines the exceptional from the maybe a bit more basic.
Yeah, I would say though. I don't know. What do you think, Karthika?
I think You're right. We're predominantly not employment lawyers. I'm not going to say I'm going to sit here and I know everything about employment law. There are employment lawyers who are there for the statutory legal requirements of your business, and you have to know your business, right? So I came from something like health tech, and now I'm with Beta Mojo, which is a hospitality industry, which is not as heavily regulated as maybe the health tech industry. So I need to know the differences between, okay, what are the legalities in, say, the health tech industry versus hospitality industry? So I need to learn like what policies are necessary and what are maybe flexible on. But one of the stories that has always resonated with me, and I always say this, is when I was studying, is one of my professors, she said, okay, look, we have, there's a story about a CEO, she joined a business and she, I think it was like an oil rig or something. There was a lot of death in that business, a lot of workers were dying. And instead, the first thing you think about is she will go in and she's going to change all the policies and procedures straight away. And she didn't. She said she rallied up the team and she goes, what's the actual problem here? Like, why are there this many deaths and why is this happening? It can't just be health and safety. We have so many health and safety policies here, so it can't be just health and safety. She rallied the team up, and it's about team working in that scenario. It was like, let's think out the box, as Olia said, let's think out of the box of, this might not be a policy problem. This might not be a legality problem. This might be something just with us that we need to work on as a team. And she, I mean, if you haven't heard of her, Amy Edmondson, go YouTuber, she talks about this thing called teaming, and it's wonderful. And she rallied the team, and that's how she got past all these policies and procedures. And I think HR has this, notion, I guess, about we're just policing and all about the policies and the legalities. That's not true. We do much more. Probably find out how much we do.
I like what you said there. It's like it reminds me really of the last episode we did with Ghislaine Chan on the Modern Employer podcast, when we were talking about how do you actually create process, aside from creating process, how do you create processes that people want to do? Like, how do you mobilize people to follow the policy that you've written? How long it takes, where it starts from, what are the steps you're taking, like what is the atmosphere that has to exist in order for people to recognize that those are important things, what sort of culture it has to be. And when you put all of those things together, suddenly you realize that for just legalities to even work, you have to have people with the right mindset, that you have to have a good talent acquisition function for to bring in. You had to set up really strong culture, and you've had to build up your engagement so that people suddenly start caring about the information you drip feed them over time. Like, and all of that is your people's team responsibility to build all of those things. So yeah, the cake and the layering and the outside the box, it's just like there's just so much stuff to talk about in that in that whole idea.
I think that's a really interesting way to put it. For these legalities to, like the employment law side of it, to work, you have to have the right conditions. And Carl, to your point about, is it Amy Edmondson?
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah, that sort of shows that kind of thing. It's not necessarily just these right policies that have to be in place, but the right conditions have to be there. You mentioned there your podcast. I forgot to mention that. So Olia and Karthika have a podcast, which is how I came to know Karthika, especially. I think Olia, I might have met you through People Stories, and then Karthika on the podcast. It's some really, really good stuff on there. We'll get a link in the chat soon. Ollie, I just wanted to pick up on one thing you said there. You said at the back of your mind, you've got all these benefits, perks that can impact the full-time employees, contractors, etc., and part-time people. But you had to address the employment law side of that as well, or at least you had to have this back of your mind kind of thing when you're thinking about these new things you want to introduce. Did you have any examples of either challenges you faced in that space? Or like benefits that you've been able to introduce to the company that have achieved this high levels of candidate experience in spite of the legal side of things?
So this is very delicate, and it is going to be even more delicate from the new IR 35 regulations that are coming into play, where you literally have to rethink all of the wording, all of the processes that you had around your contractors and your freelancers that are working for you, to make sure that on paper, as legally as a minimum on paper, and on your ways of working with them, you do not overstep that boundary that basically equates them to what a permanent worker would be like at your company. And there are so many things, and just like if you want to find out more, I think it's a whole separate conversation, and I'd really encourage you to kind of go away and I'm talking to the audience right now, not to you, Karthik. I know you know about this.
You'll do it.
just sort of to go away and like really read up on this, because it's just too much to cover. But if we talk about the benefits side of it, and like what you mentioned, Barry, sort of the retention side of it, it's important to make people feel like a unit, like a team. Like it's important to make them feel a part of your business, because if somebody feels like they are just there clocking in and clocking out on their contract, they don't have that same I guess in-group behaviors, those in-group affinity to the culture, to their teams, and they feel like outsiders. And that's where you start getting, some withdrawal from your team activities, from some company meetings, some agendas that they start missing, some things that are happening they, don't pay attention to. And it can be very dangerous, because if that person has to know some of those things and they don't pay attention to them, it will make them less productive in the long run after a few of those important things get missed. So in my experience with Switchy at the moment, we had some permanent team members that moved to live in other countries during the last 12 months, global pandemic, all of that. People moved to live with their families abroad, and suddenly you have a person who is a totally engaged permanent employee, really loves working with the company, with the team. All that sort of has really changed is the wording on their contract. But even that makes people feel separate. Even like, as much as you want to try and still involve them, still bring them on board, there's just something in here that clicks and makes them separate themselves. And it's this psychological separation that this person experiences that is so difficult to bridge as a people person, because it's so sensitive to one's being that it's really, really hard to think about everything holistically, inclusively, while also keeping at the back of your mind that sometimes that psychological barrier somebody creates in front of them that makes them feel a bit separate from your team. It's hard to bridge that, and it's like, that's a challenge that I've been having, and I've openly been talking to these people. I've openly been asking, what can I do? What more can I do? What more can Switchy do to make you feel a part? And they were saying, I don't know, nothing. Everything is fine. I just that's just how I feel. And it's like, maybe there is a point at which you accept that sometimes people choose to be on that path by themselves. And you need to know when you need to stop pushing as well, because when you are starting to, you know, as a people team myself, I'm very much like, I want to get everyone involved. I want everyone to feel happy. I want the fuzzy feelings. I want the, you know, all those things, all the sparkles. I want it all. But you need to recognize when that starts kind of spilling into unnecessary smothering, and when you need to stop yourself and be like, that person has made this decision to remain their whole self in this context that works for them, that makes them feel safe at this moment. And all I can do right now is make sure it doesn't get worse while I still have my arms open like this when they decide to come back. But I'm not going to force anything more than this. As long as you are transparent and you show that all of that love and affection and all that fluffy shit is there, then it's people's decision to, you know, come back to you when they feel like they want it. So I guess that's it's been a long answer. I'm sorry, but
no, that's good. That's good. That's good. Carl, did you have anything to add, or?
I just summarized. To summarize, I think, you know, sorry, what Ollie was saying is that it's about safety and just making sure that there's safety in the workplace. And that comes with psychological safety, you know, with distributed teams, especially cross-culturally, you know, that is very important to understand their cultures, to understand where they belong. It's not necessarily pushing your benefits on them. It's about rewarding them in the right way. It doesn't have to be a financial way. It could be some other way. Talk to them, do one-on-ones, do pulse surveys, get that out there, find out what it is that they specifically need and what you're missing cross-culturally, right? Because you need to be, especially in this role, you have to be open-minded. You have to learn. It's a continual learning process. Everyone is individual, yet as you scale, you know, you don't want to stop that personalization, and that's a challenge. You don't want to ever stop that. But also, you know, as you scale, you have to think about your countries that you're in, how safe you're making this environment. Is everyone able to give their opinions? Is the technology right for them? Resources right for them? And, you know, maybe it's just about resources. You know, they need the right work set up wherever they're, you know, at. Maybe they're finding it difficult to communicate with their team from wherever they're at. It's not just about the typical benefits that you push on to someone, and I think that's what safety really is, just understanding where we can do better.
Yeah, nice. I like that. I caught a few things that you both said there. As you said, doing one-to-ones, asking poll surveys, that staying open-minded is kind of obvious and you almost assumed, but at the same time, it's one of those things that you've got to remember to constantly, stay open-minded. I think that's great, and constantly ask questions. And Ollie, yeah, what can I do? What more can I do? What more can the switchy do? What more can the company do? Constantly asking that. Like I've often found that in the early days, it was only like the third or fourth time of asking somebody that you might get the answer of what's on their mind. So making sure that they feel safe to do so.
It's totally this way. And I think, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just that, again, that human psychology, but that's also one thing that I learned in transformational coaching when I was doing that when you start working with someone, it takes on average 3 sessions before they actually tell you what they want and what they want to do and what's on their mind. It takes 3 sessions for people. That's like 3 hours of talking, right? Talking with this, giving them as safe a space as possible. And only on the 3rd hour of that, you know, direct interaction, they actually open up and actually let you in. So take that from coaching, take that from surveys, take that from one-to-one conversations with your team. It's not easy to find out what people actually think. And it takes time to build the trust for them to open up.
Yeah. Okay, nice. Evie, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Barry. What an interesting, I mean, the skills that you've mentioned there, patience, obviously the fact it takes 3 sessions, 3 hours of counsel, or maybe even it's not that motivated, maybe it's just building rapport, the observations, being able to listen, also just the use of the word, as you said, Olia, not to smother. That's kind of almost a verb that you wouldn't associate with a business relationship, and yet it's obviously something very important within HR. So I wanted to ask, what else would you add to that list of the personality assets or even the skill set that you think would make a good HR specialist, to use a broad term?
Mm-hmm. Karthika, go first.
I mean, I think we spoke about this on the Modern Employer
Yeah.
in a podcast, and I think it depends on what stage your business is really in. Especially in the tech side of things, it depends on what stage your business is in, on what the needs and skill sets you actually require. I think Olia said, an early stage business, a generalist is very important. I've now joined Vita Mojo and I'm a little bit more specialist, like in an area. So got that strategic element side of me. And the team that I have done really amazing so far. And it's been quite a very generalist way of doing things, and it's been done extremely well. So they just want the direction of a strategic point of view. So, I think it depends on the size of your business, what you're looking for from the people team specifically, what you're looking for from a person. So, for instance, myself, I've never really been, my view is I've never really been good at, being the sole person in the team and starting it from scratch, like completely from scratch. With 10 people, like no one's ever wanted me for 10, a business that is 10 people. They've really wanted me at 30 plus, because that's when they're sort of doing sort of the things that I'm capable of. So it just depends where your business is at. You could say you could have a generalist on the team. It depends again how your people function wants to function, and how your people function is looked at. So you could be a people function that is administrative or more traditional. That is totally fine, because you've come into an incumbent. It might be more traditional. That's totally fine. Or your new people function, that is like a product, and you treat it like a product. Right. So it just depends. So if you treat it like a product, then you need various different experts in that area, and you've got to trust them to do that piece. So yeah, it depends, I guess.
Yeah, I think we definitely discussed this at length on that episode. But just something to add is that when you asked Evie about the skills, I think that I met, I don't know, over the last year, honestly, I met so many peers in the field, so many heads of people, so many, people professionals that we spoke either at roundtables, through the People Stories community, or we spoke, one-on-one, and we had donut chats, whatever it was. I've just always noticed that people have like some core things in them that really help them on this journey, no matter what size company they're entering, or no matter what sort of skill set, toolkit they can bring to the business at whatever stage the business is. There's always this like core like personality aspects of those people that are pretty similar, and they, you know, end up being that compassion or willingness to understand and accept people for who people are. Then there was, you know, willingness to push the envelope and, you know, think what else you could be doing, and that thinking outside the box. And the People Stories community is full of professionals like that. That is a sort of a progressive thinking place where you go and you really try and investigate some things that you want to learn and do different. And then it's just like constantly trying to learn what else is out there and what else you do not know. And the last year has shown us that there is so much we did not know how to do, and we had to try it all out, and we had to just sort of investigate on our own terms and out of our own terms how to deal with situations that we've never been trained for. And that's sort of that willingness to just understand that it's not only this year that you didn't know how to deal with. It is so many more situations that are going to happen to you throughout this journey that you will not know how to deal with, but you almost take responsibility that you are the one who's accountable to deal with those challenges and take people through those challenges so that they are happy, unscarred, haven't even noticed things changed. It's still all amazing for them. But you're like almost like this barrier that sort of accepts, like the atmosphere of the planet. You like accept all the asteroids and try and remove them before they hit the team, before they like, you know, really impact the balance of the inside. You try to envision those things. And I just found, talking to so many different like HRs from People Stories, but also that I met online on LinkedIn, that those were some key things that they were just like accepting, that there are things you need to learn still, even doesn't matter how many years of experience you had. Like, remember, Karthika, like we were talking before how when we were talking about recruitment and like talent acquisition and all that stuff, and we touched on how difficult it is for like sort of graduate HRs or sort of entry level HRs or HRs who have like 1 to 2 years of experience, how difficult it is for them to be recruited today, because there are so many people out there who have 10 plus years of experience, and it's so difficult to fight the argument that in the last 10 years things were so differently done, that even if you have all that experience, it doesn't mean that the things of the last 2 years that happened, it doesn't mean you know them better, or you've gone through them in a different, like, it's just, the world has just changed since 10 years ago. So it's like, I almost find the more progressive thinkers around the community of people that just went into the profession because they were pushed into it, because they really want to change it, because they really are tired and sick of it and they want something new. And it saddens me sometimes that it's really difficult for people like that to make it into a people team and to really be hired because of that trust issue there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just to highlight, it's hire for attitude. You can always skill someone up. And if you are hiring a junior individual into the team, don't treat them just like an administrator, really skill them up. Because otherwise you do come into this, and a lot of people now have come into this, you know, wall of like, you know, administration tasks all the time. So what can I do more than these administration tasks? Because this is not what I signed up for, right? So it is hire for attitude, if you can, hire for the attitude. And, you know, you get them skilled. That's the best way possible, because You know, I think, as you said, like in people stories, you get such forward thinkers, you know, really. And I would say all of the people on that learning community are the ones that are driving the people side forward. And genuinely, there's so much to learn from them. So.
Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Evie, do you mind if I come in here? Just had a question come through. Let me see, there was something that I wrote down actually. I really enjoyed, I love a metaphor or an analogy. And I love this idea that you have to be the barrier to protect your team for the asteroids that you don't yet know what they look like. Right?
The
That
atmosphere.
you wouldn't have predicted last year. So, you know, you don't know what's to come, what changes are going to happen. I love that. So yeah, thank you both for that. So yeah, the question we have had come in. Someone would be interested to hear the views of the panelists on the business challenges they envisage from the move to home hybrid working, as well as those that will specifically sit with the HR team.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, historically, HR haven't been agile enough, and I use that term, is because we haven't been digitally like with digital transformation, we haven't been quite there yet. In the light of what the pandemic has happened, there are so many tools, there are so much digital transformation and automation in our own HR space and the people space that we can administer to get the other bigger challenges of the business that we face as a business, as a whole business, so the bigger picture. But just on the people front, I think there is that element of automation and digital transformation that we need to keep up with. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. And also a lot of businesses, you know, are facing with COVID at the moment, you know, changes to the business. With changes comes cultural changes or upset employees, or, you know, just so it depends. So look, like I said this a few months ago, when all of this really hit, you know, a lot of companies were making people redundant. And, you know, I think with furlough coming to an end, that might still end up happening, unfortunately. It is how you treat your employees during that process. Keep your values in mind. Do not drop them. Do not drop your moral standards in that time. And yes, it might be a business decision, but your values are super important. And, you know, I think the companies that did drop it, you know, they were kind of publicly named and shamed, unfortunately. And the companies that did adhere to their values and put employees at the forefront, you know, great opportunity for them, because, you know, even if they were going through the rough times, well, look, ultimately they did it well. And they did it with the humbleness that they should have done it with. So I think that's the biggest challenges right now, is ultimately we need to still stick with our digital transformation and that side of things. But as a business, as you said, we don't know what's going to go on in the near future. You know, we can only predict with trends from last year, or, you know, things opening back up. We can probably start predicting things and putting that in place. But as much as, you know, I think previously it was much easier to do risk analysis on a lot of things. Now I feel like that stuff of risk analysis and consequences, if we put this in place, it's like, we don't actually know anymore, because things have changed. People's attitudes have changed to all of this. You know, working from home, hybrid working. It's a real challenge for the people team to navigate, but also the organization to navigate in itself, because if the company are not used to it, it's like, okay, now we have to make this safe space in a digital world, and we have to make a whole different way of working, which is not the easiest thing to do. And I'm not saying that, you know, me and Olya have any of the probable answers to the future, or anyone has probable answers to the future. But I think one of the things that me and Olya spoke about at the beginning of last year in March, we spoke about hybrid working and how important it would be. And I think at that time, people were kind of like, what? They would never go that far. And now we're talking about it as a thing. So yeah, we didn't predict it, but it was more like, let's get prepared, just in case. And I think that's the stance that every business needs to take for the challenges ahead. Let's just get prepared for plan A, B, or C to happen, just in case, rather than being reactive to this. Otherwise, our people function will always be firefighters, and that's not what we're here for. We're here to not be so reactive. We're here to be somewhat proactive in this time, because we've now had a year to kind of settle in to this world of working. Not get fit to Olya.
Thanks, Oscar. Olya, did you have anything else that you wanted to add onto that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what Karthika was saying there. And I guess just to really summarize, and the one point that I think, amongst so many other things, what we spoke about at the beginning is, when you have the right culture and the right ways of working, change, new stuff, you know, new shocks, they will be almost like absorbed by that cushion of your culture. So the challenge is to try and maintain at worst, nurture at middle, and enhance at best the culture that you had before the pandemic, the culture that you're having today, and the culture that you want to have in the future. And the reason why it's going to be challenging is because when people are working remotely for such a long time, you know, the culture that they have in their minds and in their emotions and in their memories could be, and it's scary, but it could be different to coming back out, seeing each other again. And in fact, think about the people who were made redundant or resigned, or, you know, just in any other circumstances, people who are not there anymore, people who in their memories were the examples of culture to them, and who they were holding on to as personalities, you know, of culture that your company represented. Those people are not there. And if you had a big hiring spur and you have 25 new faces in your company, think of that first social event, or that first time people see each other face to face. It is going to be a shock to them, because the dynamics between people, the relationship and all that stuff is going to be so severely impacting their new building memories of your culture. And they're going to take those memories away, go back to working from home in that hybrid model or so, until they meet each other again. And, you know, every time this memory is changed of how they're perceiving their culture to be, you are having a risk that your culture is getting worse or is not being nurtured properly. So, and there are things to tackle that, such as we mentioned before. Keep continuously talking to people and asking them how they feel. Keep continuously following your own culture with the walk the talk, and keep doing things to show that your culture is alive. And then bring the right people on board. Bring people who will help you do this, not drag you down with this because they don't care, or because that's the wrong culture for them, or because they have some better idea or a different idea in mind that does not relate to your mission and your values. Like those are just some risk factors to think about. But here, I think culture and nurturing it or growing it, that's going to be a really big challenge. And as we know, from that comes everything else. And as Karthika said, makes you from a firefighter into a real progressive thinker and revolutionist for the people side of things.
Sure. And
Brilliant.
what I love about Vita Mojo, how they've like done things is, you know, everything that they put out has a culture aligned to it, a cultural like pillar aligned to that. So they know that, okay, this is going to be successful because we know that we have, you know, put the culture behind that. So I think align each one of the things that you put out as a people team specifically to a culture or whatever it may be. Business challenges, self-reflect during this time. It's very important as leadership. You self-reflect, but you move forward. You have ideas to move forward. That's the whole point.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we did have one question that came in, and I think you both mentioned this, the People Stories community. I'm going to try and find a link. So just quickly, if there is anyone in the audience that's not in People Stories, really, really incredible community, mainly on a Slack group, isn't it? Where most of the conversation is done, but there's events and resources and loads of other stuff as well. But it's one of the most active Slack groups I've ever seen, and it's all full of people. They're quite strong on who gets in. So everyone's really, really committed and helpful and engaged. So yeah, definitely sign up to that. We did have a question come in. I know we're going to have to cut it at about 5 to, aren't we? So if you can cover this in 3 or 4 minutes. Are there any tips for supporting employees through motivation ups and downs that seem to come with remote working? It's much harder to spot and support. Any advice on that from either of you?
I think with supporting people, it's really important to understand that as a people team, you are not alone, or you shouldn't be alone in this. Just as you take any one individual in life, that individual will have different support systems and mechanisms. It will have a family, it will have a best friend, it will have a dog, it will have a buddy at work, it will have their manager. Like, there are different support systems in that. And I think sometimes, or something that we do in coaching a lot, is we try and identify in that whole like circle of life, which are the systems that for this individual might not be working, and which are the systems that we can touch without smothering, without going too much, because that's not our job as well. Like, what are the systems that they touch at work that need more enhancement? And if it is communication with the team, then we need to really dig deeper and find out what makes that team communicate better. What are the rituals they have in that team? Do they have team huddles? Do they have weekly drinks on Friday to celebrate the end of the week? Do they get rewarded as a team? Do they get encouraged as a team? What is the manager like? Does the manager have enough people management skills and abilities to be a good mentor to them and a good coach? Does the manager have a good way to support the person just mentally? Like, do they have that emotional intelligence and awareness to be able to recognize when someone is struggling or needs help, or when somebody needs to just be asked, how are you? And then wait a second, be like, okay, so how are you? Without just sort of moving on and letting that slide. And kind of when you take all of that together and you sort of build that picture, then as a people function, you can identify where there are things you can drip some more like adjustments into. And sometimes it's mathematical like that. Sometimes it's about breaking the problem down and seeing where it's broken and then trying to fill the gaps. And that's the fastest thing that will work on the personal level. On the more holistic level, think about, is that it's just this one person or this one team who's struggling, or is it your entire business who's proper burnt out and is struggling? Because if the problem is more widespread, then you need to break that problem down into more systematic basis. That organizational design that Kartika was talking about, is it a good organizational design? Does it give you the output that you expect it to give? Or does it wear your people down, doesn't let them talk, and doesn't make them feel like they're bringing impact? All of those things can impact one's experience of being employed at your company, and therefore their mental well-being.
One thing I can probably recommend highly for everyone is on an organizational design level is just making sure that your people managers, how many ever reports that they're having, they can manage that. Because I think during this time, it's important that your people managers are doing regular check-ins, and that is very time consuming. So if your people managers have got 12 reports and it's not working, redesign, because it's really important that the people managers' productivity to take care of their team's mental well-being is looked after. I think, you know, there are lots of resources now that have come up for mental health and physical health and, you know, just well-being in general. So, you know, the SPIL resource, so, you know, check that out. That's been implemented at Vita. So I think, you know, things like that where employees can maybe not talk to the people team about certain things that we're not qualified to, you know, we're not therapists, to talk to people about. They can talk to actual qualified people. So I think things like that, you can monitor trends from that. And the Vita Mojo people function have been great to implement that already to their whole company. And, you know, they're taking trends and, you know, doing the right things to make sure that we're supporting in the right way and at the right time, because timing is crucial. Because, you know, if you've got a product launch, especially in terms of product launches for whatever reason, in software, it's very regular. You've got a big product launch, you want to make sure people aren't burnt out. So you're putting the right things in. You know, Vita Mojo have great rewards, mental health days. So, you know, these things that you can consider to put in to make sure that your employees aren't burnt out and that they're keeping well.
Brilliant. Olia, Karthika, Evie, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for joining us. I think we've just gone over. So yeah, really appreciate all that. I put some links there to the podcast and the People Stories community. So feel free to check them out. And we will be in touch, and we'll be back again in a couple of weeks with another one. So please do join us again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was a real pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you for joining. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.